Hi, Body Messiah. Today we're covering a brief message called Messiah's Body. Why believe only Haiti is cursed? This is given as like a rhetorical question, like why? Why are a lot of people so up in arms in the way in which they, how shall I say, are being judgmental towards Haiti? This is a trend that got triggered. I think the last time I heard something regarding Haiti that was negative, as far as a lot of evangelicals being judgmental about Haiti, was back when the huge earthquake happened. I think it was in 2011, 2010. I'm not sure which year. But that was the first time where I saw blatantly a lot of American evangelicals being judgmental about what was happening in Haiti. And as I observed that, you know, the thing that baffled me and irritated me the most was to hear some of them make the statement that, which is a false and wrong statement, I believe, that God is judging Haiti because they slaughtered the French. Now, on the surface, it sounds like they did a great offense, that they just went out and started attacking French people and slaughtering them and murdering them. But that's the surface level, and the only thing that people would say. And then they would also add on that a lot of them partook in voodoo or witchcraft or whatever. Okay. But let's address this first thing that we need to make extremely clear. The Haitian people population is made up of descendants of Africans and African slaves who were taken from the fatherland and brought there once again to be subjected to the brutality of slavery. All right? And we're talking about harsh slavery. We're not talking about servitude as a servant, a maid, or a butler would be in someone's household and considered a part of the family, right? So mainly the French had taken the descendants of Africans and African slaves there and bred them and began to try and colonize that particular island by using them, with the free labor. So they were subjected to all the brutality and hostility that every descendant of African slaves who scattered across the world was subjected to. Now, I'm giving a summary and a brief history. I don't know the names and all the details of all the warriors that began to rise up against the French, the colonizers that were placing them in captivity and under that oppression. But the first time they rose up, they beat off most of the colonizers and fought them off. Then the French made some type of agreement with those in Haiti and said, look, we're going to work with you guys. Basically, we're going to pay you for whatever labor that you put forth and all the work that you do fairly. We're not going to try and brutalize you, castrate you, hang you, and buck break you, and all this stuff, right? So they made a promise that a kind of a peace treaty of some sort, that they would not do that to them, okay? After the descendants there in Haiti beat off their oppressors. So over time, after some years passed, they began to brutalize the descendants of Africans and African slaves, right? Again. And so they made a final decision like, that's it. The only way that we're going to be free from this type of oppression and slaughter and rape, we have to kill off all of the French. And so they pretty much did just that. They slaughtered them. They slaughtered their oppressors and beat them off away from them, from oppressing them. Now, this is the reason why they fought and killed the French, because they were tired of being subjected to brutality, rape, castrations, hanging, buck breaking, breeding, forced labor, brutality, okay, hunger, thirst. So when a person makes a statement, blanket statement on the surface about Haiti, negative, that this is the reason why they're being judged, I say to them, you're not covering the whole story, right? These actual descendants were some of the main head leaders of all the tribes that were scattered. These were the strongest, fiercest warriors, and they are actual descendants of Israel. And the reason why they were scattered to various islands, from Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Cuba, um, the Bahamas, Trinidad, Tobago, Jamaica, all over, because they knew these were the strongest of the tribes, and that they would raise up and rebel. So they were very fearful of having to have them on the quote mainland, because they knew that would happen. And, I digress a little bit, but when the Haitians began to rise up and slaughter their oppressors, that's when you had the highest volumes of slave rebellions throughout the US. Okay? This is like 20, 30 years before the consideration of the Emancipation Proclamation. Think about that. But anyway, these strong leaders were empowering other descendants of African slaves throughout the US and other parts, probably so in Central America, South America also. Now, this is the reason why. But when we try to judge them, I feel that this structure of white supremacy was so ingrained that a lot of people would just scratch that surface and let it go, because they're so fearful to acknowledge the whole truth of what happened to Haitians, okay, and how their state became as it was. Now, to continue with the history lesson, here's what also has convinced me completely that God is not cursing, judging Haiti about the slaughter of the oppressors. The US and other the European nations got together and told these descendants of Africans and African slaves, because you slaughtered off your oppressors and killed them, you owe $100 million in reparations to the France, and they had to pay it. So they were subjected to financial oppression, which continues to this day, mind you. I believe they finished paying off this so-called debt in the 1920s or by 1940s. But still, the Babylonian system has worked to continuously oppress them and subject them to financial oppression, just like they've done to the fatherland in Africa. But the tides are changing. So when we see the whole story of what's happened to Haiti, you began to get the whole picture. And when you really realize, and you're part of those who are awakened to who the actual descendants of Israel are, you know that based on the prophecy given in Jeremiah chapter 30, God says he's going to judge all those who oppress Israel, Jacob, and these people are also descendants of that. Now, we have to make certain that we do not become prideful and tag along with groups that call themselves judging the descendants of Africans and African slaves who are descendants of Israel and Haiti. We have to wake up and observe ourselves, especially here in the US. So when these evangelicals or even members in the body of Messiah, who, mind you, have even convinced some Haitian descendants themselves that live in the US that, oh, God is judging them because of what they did. Look, God, yes, would judge them for voodoo or idolatry, but every nation on the planet has engaged in idolatry and turning against the standards of the Most High God. Okay? So when people begin to take on this mannerism that I call a prideful mannerism, we need to go back and read James chapter 4, verses 6 through 12. God is specifically making us aware that he opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. We have to be humble. Look, if some of us still truly believe that Haiti is being judged because they fought off and slaughtered their oppressors, then you got to understand that God is going to deal with and judge those who are oppressing them. He said it clearly in his word multiple times. But because we just finished going over the prophecy in Jeremiah chapter 30, go and look and read for yourself. He said, I'm going to punish all of those who oppress Jacob, Israel. So that means for European nations and the U.S., understand that's why a lot of judgments are falling on them and on us right now in this country, in the U.S. All these natural disasters, you have one side of the U.S. on fire. You have the heat wave happening, not only in the U.S., but all throughout Europe. You have flooding that happens on one side, hurricanes back to back that goes up one coast of the U.S. But you don't see evangelicals and members in the body of Messiah acknowledging these judgments. And we have to be aware that if anybody in the body of Messiah calls themselves judging or calling out why God is judging a nation, be very well aware and awaken to the fact of the reason why God is judging your nation. And make sure you don't fall down that pattern of pride and thinking that you have no accountability. We all individually have accountability to the Most High God. Now, I want to share some statistics that I want to show and reflect of how the media kind of twists things. Always when it comes to descendants of Africans and African slaves, the ancient descendants of Israel, and Hebrew descendants of Patriarch Abraham, the media will always are eager to pounce on negative statistics that go against those brown and black populations. Okay? Always ready to pounce on it. But I'm going to share a statistic here so you can see how they become deathly silent on statistics when it's not favorable or negative against black and brown people. If it's favorable against them, you don't hear no mention of it. If it's something extremely negative, yeah, it's on blast all the way. So let me share the statistics here. So here we have 2019 through 2020 of the death rates for flu, cancer, heart attack, and stroke. Okay. Now notice it's question marks all the way down for Haiti because I can't find anything on them on the CDC. But usually they'll probably say, because Haiti is disorganized, it doesn't have a solid government structure, we can't figure out what the actual statistics are, right? But they're able to figure out statistics on COVID. Now observe here how for the flu, just for the flu, I have the US and I also have just one state that's very populated in the US, California. In the US, from the flu in 2019 to 2020, 62,000 people passed away from the flu. In California alone, it was 5,664. In the US, from cancer, nearly 600,000 passed away. In California, 59,512. When you look at heart attacks, this has nothing to do with breathing issues or cold, cough, flu, pneumonia. But when you look at the heart attacks, over 650,000 died from a heart attack in the U.S. California has over 62,000 that died. And let's look at stroke. Strokes, 150,000 died in the U.S. and 16,000, nearly 17,000 in California. Now, mind you, they can't keep statistics on anything, but they're certainly keeping statistics on COVID. And look at the drastic difference here. Haiti has to date only 583 people who've passed away from it. It's tragic. Even though the number is small, it's still tragic because COVID is a plague. You'll see for the whole U.S., it's 633,000. And just for California alone, it's 65,456. Now, what is these statistics? When we're talking about God's judgments falling on a nation and the reasons why, come on, U.S. Come on, all of the members in the body of Messiah in the U.S. Stop pointing your finger at another nation that you know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, has been systematically oppressed by the Babylonian system, and start looking at the actual Babylonian system that has encouraged and incorporated and inflicted oppression on these various groups. This plague is meant to humble, and man runs to all these quote solutions of man, but they have not inquired of the Most High God. And in his prophecies that he gives, while he's judging the whore of Babylon, he's telling members in the body of Messiah, he's telling those that are his people, come out of her so you won't partake of it. This brief lesson is to draw attention to why is it so easy for us to try and judge another nation and not look at what's going on within this nation? Because our mentality has been twisted to be prideful and say nothing but positive things about the U.S. We have to acknowledge the whole truth, including the atrocities, and understand that, so we won't be blindsided by all these judgments that are going to continue to fall until nations humble, until nations begin to make amends. You think about the fact that Haiti had to pay reparations to a country that chose to do their best to abuse, slaughter, kill, enslave, breed, castrate, hang their people. But yet none of these nations will ever consider and feel that it is insane to consider that reparations need to be paid to all those Haitian descendants. Think about that. Do you think God is pleased with that? And when we continue to uncover these prophecies dealing with Jacob, dealing with the actual descendants of Israel, my people, we have to be awakened fully and clear on what God is stating about that. People have to make amends towards them. So wake up and stop trying to point your fingers elsewhere and acknowledge the wrong within your own country. I'm going to give another statistics. A lot of the ministers will say stuff like about India, because we know a lot of India engage in idol worship, worshiping actual idols, statues, or what have you, right? But every nation has engaged in idol worship. So people will go, India, this is what's happening. Okay, yeah, it's true. But we still got to acknowledge all of the wrong in all the nations in the world. So if people in America start going, India is full of idols and this and this and that, they begin to forget what's going on in the U.S. So let's just look at the statistics here for just COVID alone. Okay, I hope I can get close enough because I just want you to focus on mainly the top two. So for the COVID cases, who has India beat as far as the number of cases and death? Yes, the U.S. Okay, so let's just be very, 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 very clear that if people who are in the body of Messiah in the U.S. have so much to say about other nations, figure out what's wrong with this nation. The U.S. has the highest volume of pornographic image produced in the world. The U.S. has the highest volume of drug use in the world. Sex slavery is high amongst the U.S. You want to talk about idol worship in other nations? You have actual glorification of satanic cults and satanic practices here in the U.S. And don't get me started with the Baal worship again, which is linked to white supremacy throughout the U.S. God means this plague to humble all nations. So make sure you don't get on your high horse when others try to judge nations that are predominantly inhabited by actual descendants of Israel, like Haiti or Jamaica or the Bahamas, anywhere else. Hold true to the whole truth of Adonai's word. Make sure that we don't engage in these practices which are displeasing to the Most High God. Because as these judgments are following, we can't guarantee whether or not Adonai is going to call us home to be with him. But one thing we can be sure of, that if we are aligned and abiding by his standard, and we accept the Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach, as our Lord and Savior, that we will go to our eternal rest. Our soul, don't worry about your physical body, but our soul will be at peace and at rest and enveloped by his shalom. So, body of Messiah, I hope that if you know anybody who are descendants of Haitians or any of those Africans in the diaspora that are in different islands of the sea, make them aware of the prophecy in Isaiah chapter 11, where Adonai Elohim is saying he's gathering them from all these various places. And he specifically says in the Tree of Life version that I'm going to gather you from the islands of the sea. I don't know the fate of what's going to happen for the nation of Haiti or Jamaica, the Dominican Republic, or what have you. But what I do know, as more and more of these actual descendants are awakened by the Most High God and they cleave to him, turn back to the standards of his Torah, he will make them aware of what path they should take. This gathering is going to happen. Some of them he's going to call to return back to the fatherland. But the only way that we can be certain beyond a shadow of a doubt as an individual is that we have to talk to our heavenly Abba, commune with him, and turn our whole heart back to him. I pray that you are able to share this lesson with others who are in the diaspora, who may be in the islands of the sea. Share with them some of the other lessons of Sajiko Bible studies about their actual heritage based on historical documentation, scientific documentation, and most and foremost, the word of the Most High God. He loves you with an everlasting love, and he's turning us back and our heart back to him for these latter days for a purpose. Well, thank you, Body of Messiah, for joining me. And like I always say to you, may Adonai Elohim cover and surround you and your family, shield and protect you all, and envelop you in his shalom peace. Goodbye.